Hello, everyone. Welcome again to the Author Spotlight. I'm your host, Cynthia Martin, along with my co-host and our sponsor, the Author Spotlight. I am a lover of all things books, as you can see, piles of them everywhere. I love authors and books, and I love talking to them about their book, their styles, and everything to do with authors. So today we have a guest, Cherie Cotner. Did I pronounce that right again? Cherie?
Yes,
Cherie Cotner, isn't that a beautiful name? And
thank
she's
you.
going to talk with us today about her book. And I'm actually kind of excited about this one. It sounds like we're going to have fun. It's called Breaking Your Neck is a Pain in the Butt. How I Handled Life's Challenges with Grace and Humor. So we're going to have a good time today, folks. So Cherie, welcome to the program. Tell
Thank
us
you.
a little bit about who you are and about your book.
Thank you, Cynthia, for having me. I'm excited. This is actually my first book published. I
Hmm.
published a long time ago when this accident first happened in the Plus magazine by Vincent Norman Peale. But growing up, I grew up as middle class. Although I was born in Indiana, I'm more of a Texan because I moved here when I was 5. And I grew up in Houston, Texas, and had the best of both worlds. We grew up in the city on the weekdays, and we went on the weekends to the what we called the ranch, and out in Anderson, Texas. And so then I went on to be a Texas Aggie, and met and married my husband, or ex-husband now, in 1983. And this is the key because we met we married in July of 1983. However, we were driving to see my mom for Christmas. We were taking all our Christmas gifts just to her, and then she was going to drive them to Houston. And we hit ice on a bridge in Grandview. It was black ice. We flipped over the guardrail and went down a 30-foot embankment. It was icy, it was freezing cold. And I got on the ground. I was freezing cold. I was just begging to be moved off the ground, even though I know that's not the right thing you're supposed to do. My ex-husband didn't get any um, injuries on him. He kind of went to the back of the car. I went out the T-top of the car and broke my arm, compound fracture, broke my neck at C6-7, and was they talked about life flighting me that night, but the weather was so bad that they decided that it was safer to take me by ambulance. So I was taken to Harris Hospital in Fort Worth, was there for 2 weeks. And from there on, I went to Dallas rehab and stayed there for 5 months. And so a lot of this book, I started the book years ago, basically by my style, I guess, would be just taking Christmas letters I wrote over the years. People always enjoyed my Christmas letters. I tried not to brag about things. Most of it was about funny stories that happened that year. And most of the time it involved equipment. Then once I started having children, it was goofy stories with them. And so just over the years, I kept writing these Christmas letters. Well, then when my kids got to be high school and one in college, I started actively writing and starting to put it all together. And my family are really a good support system. We got together and started, I guess, trying to decide what titles, brainstorming on titles. My younger sister Karen came up with the title, "What You Always Wanted to Ask a Quadriplegic But Were Afraid to Ask," and sister-in-law came up with "Don't Have a Cow, I Do Have a Cat." That was my cat got lost in the accident. There was a few that we rejected about Velcro is my best friend because I do live by Velcro all the time. My hand splints, everything is just Velcro around me. So but that's kind of started where it started. My challenges were back then they didn't have verbal like right now I talk into my phone all the time to make notes, but back then I just had to actually type into the computer, and I used hand splints and pencils to do the actual writing. And then I would go for a while, and then I would lose the whole everything I had written, so I'd have to start all over again. So that was some of my challenges that I had. But overall, I just started to keep going at it, and it took a couple of years. And when I finally started looking for a publisher, I started with a TCU Press that held on to it for 2 years during the pandemic. And then after that, they said, well, we don't want to go this route. So I ended up self-publishing.
Wow. There were so many gems in what you shared with me, Cherie, and I just want to back up for a second. I want to clarify something that you said, and I have about 4 questions here. So let's start with
Okay.
the first one, because I always like to go for the elephant in the room.
Mhm.
So the blaring question for me, the elephant in the room, is you mentioned that you like voice activated and speaking into your phone. Can you explain, and using splints? Why is the reason for that? Let's go into that for a moment.
The voice activation is because I don't have to write as much. I can start talking into my phone and making notes. I do have to be careful though, because you never know what, it doesn't always say the correct thing. So it allows me to speak into it and then go back and proofread it. And then what I do a lot of times is I'll move it over to my Gmail and then put it onto my computer. So it just allows me to less typing and less working. My hand splint, I can show you this. I have these hand splints that are really handy, and if I can write with both hands, but if I want to actually be able to read it real well, or somebody else to read it real well, I will put on this hand splint, and as you can see, it's got Velcro on it. So I bring this up and put it on like that. It's like,
Okay, so you've had some sort of damage is what I'm getting to. Is that correct? Okay.
exactly.
I
cannot
can't
use my
tell because
hand.
you're sitting. So we can't see anything. So I'm like, okay, there must be some sort of a disability or some sort of, is this long-term from the accident?
Yes,
Okay.
I cannot
That's
use
what
my
I was trying to
hand.
get to. I was like, I'm not quite sure I understand, because I don't have any kind of as you can tell, I don't have any kind of mobility issues, but I use a recording program myself because
Mhm.
I'm a pretty fast typer, but I'm a much faster talker. And ideas come no matter where I am. And so I can just pick up my phone and talk into my
Right.
phone, just like you.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
it's a great tool for people who are authors or some sort of content makers to be able to
exactly.
speak in, whether it's to remember something or rework something. You'll be listening to the radio, or you'll see
Mhm.
something and it inspires you and you think, oh, I'll remember. And
Yeah,
after a while that ain't gonna happen, as wonderful it
exactly.
is.
Yes,
So use the tools that are available, right?
exactly. And a lot of people don't realize I can't use my fingers, that, because I use my hands a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Some people that are disabled with my level, their hands are kind of bent like that, kind of, and
Mm-hmm.
so you can tell that they're disabled. But a lot of people don't realize that I can't use my fingers. So I can use my wrist, and so that's why the hand splints I use are called wrist-driven splints. They
Wow.
just work with my wrist.
Well,
Yeah,
you just shot the theory that that someone with limited mobility can't write a book. You just shot
exactly.
that right out of the park. So I think that's fabulous. So
Yes.
let's back up a little bit more now that we kind of have that this is kind of like the present day of the results of that accident. I think you said it was in 1983. Is that right?
Correct.
So I'm originally from Michigan, so I understand black ice. I know
Mhm.
about black ice.
Right.
I think people don't realize in Dallas you can get that. I always say I lived in the Dallas, not, yeah, lived in the Dallas area, and we traveled to Dallas. It was one of my favorite cities, a
Mhm.
lot. And one of the things I say about Dallas, because it's right there in the jet stream, that it gets every possible type of weather that there is, it can occur in Dallas. That's for sure.
Yes.
But I want to, for the audience who may not understand what black ice is, I want to kind of just give a little explanation, and please correct me or add in, Cherie, if you disagree or you have more. Coming from Michigan, black ice, not quite sure why they call it black, maybe because you can't see it through the blacktop. And
Hmm.
it's clear and you can't really tell it's there. The way I would test it when I was in Michigan is tap on my brake very quickly and softly, and it gives you a little, you're on ice, but it
Yeah,
isn't something that you can detect by just the visual eye. That's why it's so dangerous, is because you're on ice and you don't even know it. So
exactly.
I can understand, your statement that you were on black ice, and that's where you lost control.
And unfortunately, we were the first car in the line of cars, so we hit it first.
Hmm.
All the cars that came, there were several cars that came behind us, and they just slid off down the embankment. We were the only ones that flipped the guardrail.
Wow. And
It
so
was
what did you say that was on a bridge or just on a roadway?
bridge.
So,
We
folks,
were crossing the bridge.
yeah, when you see those signs that says, watch out for ice on bridge, or that's not exactly what they say, but there are those signs in the areas that do have, believe it,
And,
because it's
and
true. You always think you'll be able to see it, but you don't.
at the time, though, this did not have that sign.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. That's probably, I imagine your accident and many other ones are
Yeah.
probably what prompt them to put those up for sure.
Yes.
Um,
Hmm.
and so setting the stage for why you wrote the book and the situation, and we'll talk through more of that. But also, um, you mentioned that your kids are gone, and I really want to do a shout out to those of us who have raised children. And then it's like, okay, now what do I do with my life, right? And so I want to encourage women and probably fathers too. I can't speak to how men feel. I'm not a man. But they sometimes in retirement age, midlife or later, a little bit plus more, we wonder if our life is over or what we can contribute. And I think we discredit the wisdom that we've gathered along the way because we just don't have the wisdom in our youth that we do now, right? We went through these experiences, we've learned some stuff. And it sounds like your book is full of that kind of wisdom and actually in a way that it's I don't want to be insensitive, but taking hard things and the reality and then also putting a humorous twist on them. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, awesome.
That's,
So you found yourself after this accident in 1983, 5 months in a rehab in Dallas. That's, I mean, were your children young then? Did you have children at that point?
I did not have children yet.
Okay, so
We were
this is prior to
we
children.
were just married, and my ex-husband came every day until my mother finally said, "Cherie, give him a break. He needs a break," because he was driving from Fort Worth to Dallas every day to come see me in the evenings after he went to work,
Right.
and so
I
it was right track.
yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, I don't know what it was like in 1983, but driving from Dallas to Fort Worth and back again is a traffic nightmare, let
Mhm.
alone the length of the drive. So
Right.
tell us more about, so you find yourself, were you conscious during all of this accident? And when you said you felt you were laying on ice, is that true? Were you really laying on ice or was it just a status of your body function at the time?
I was on ice. I was in and out of consciousness. In fact, my mother had just gotten a new area code and he was trying to call her because we were going to her place in Anderson. And I remembered and gave it to him during one of those moments I was,
Mhm.
cognitive of everything.
Right.
And, and then I was I was conscious during some of the um, ambulance ride because I remember a man in the ambulance telling me, "Oh, I've seen these before, and you'll never walk again," something to that degree. And I thought, I never thought about hearing it from an ambulance driver, but that's what I remember.
Wow.
It was,
Yeah, you just you wonder about, you always think that those types of individuals are trained not to
yeah,
say the things,
exactly.
diagnose, or to say specific things over you, and
That,
they're not always, right? They're not always,
right.
that's for sure.
Yes.
So I'm not medical in any way. I tell everyone that. I'm not sure what I understand 6 and 7. I don't know where that is or what that means. But I guess this
Yeah.
would have been a really good time for me to talk about the result. And
Mm.
the result has been lifelong. Is that right?
Yes. Yes. I got a kick out of when I was on Social Security. They'd send me a letter every so often saying, "Are you still disabled?" Yes, definitely. I'm disabled for the rest of my life. And in my book, I try not to get too technical, but I try to explain the levels. And it's like Superman was level 2, I think. He was way up there in the neck. Mine's a little lower down because in a C6, 7, I think 7, then it goes into your T levels, and that's more of your paraplegics. So
Okay.
just right above the paraplegic. I always think if I'd just been one level down lower, I could have had my my hands and stuff. And
Yeah.
it's just each level determines what you have. And I
Right.
have sensation in some parts of my body, and like I can feel soft on one side and a needle stick on the other, that kind of thing. It's just very bizarre.
Hmm. Well,
So,
I think that's something that all of us struggle with. I'm sure not at the level that you have, but
mhm.
regrets or wishing it was another way, and that's
Yeah,
something that I'm sure, had to come to term with. Like you said, if it
sure.
was only here, then I would have at least had my hands. Yeah.
Yes.
And so
Because I always
how did you deal with those kinds of thoughts?
Well, at first it was, in therapy I was in therapy for like 5 months. Um, they told me I had a woman that was a psychologist that met with me once a day or so. And I kept saying, oh, I don't need this. I don't need this. But it really was helpful in the long run.
Hmm.
And, you just day by day, you get a little bit better. One thing I did bring out in the book was no matter what your situation is, you can always find somebody worse off than you are. And I tell you that rehab was just an eye opener. And when I first got there, I thought, well, this is not me. I'm not like this. But as I got through it, I thought, we were like a family. We just kind of
Yeah.
got to know each other and disabled, all of us. And you just learn to go on they wanted me to stay an extra month. I said, no, I need to get home and start living the real world.
Right.
And that was what it was. And I
I
wanted
think
to always have kids, though, from the very beginning. I told them I wanted to have, they said, wait 5 years. We waited 5 years to almost to the day and had my first child.
Wow. Um, I think it's really interesting, back to what you said before you started talking about children, that when we find ourselves in a situation in which we bond with people, I think that's what happens when we work closely in a team environment.
Exactly.
Or when I live here in Florida on the Gulf Coast, and so we just started hurricane season, right? And I'm not speaking that over us this year, but a few years ago, we went through Ivan, which actually was quite a few years ago at this point. But when the whole neighborhood is out of power, you really bond with your neighbors because you begin sharing food and tips. Hey, there's milk at such and all the different things. And forever after that, you have forged such a greater bond, for sure.
Yeah.
So I
That's
understand that. And I think I don't know, I've not been in that kind of a situation, but I would think in a situation where you're all struggling to overcome something, and
mhm.
probably you became each other's cheerleaders, my guess. And
Yeah.
you also probably saw things and became much more compassionate. I mean,
Yes.
maybe you are a compassionate person first. I know that it would definitely enlarge my capacity for compassion.
Yes.
It,
I enjoyed this one young man and I said in my book, he would exercise and he started going, grow little boobies bigger, bigger, so I can have a better figure. And he would just, make us all laugh. And it was just,
right,
it was a great feeling to be with other people in that situation.
right.
And, yeah,
So talk about a little bit about your journey when you left the rehab and you went home, and then you said you had to wait 5 years for children. What was the
yeah,
transition like from going from a rehab, when you left home, you're walking on your own legs and using your hands, and no, we have no idea what's going to befall us, but when you return home months and months later, I imagine it's 5 plus because you stayed at the
right.
rehab 5 months, so I have no idea how long you were in the hospital. So tell about that transition between that and getting back to what you said in the real world.
Sure. Well, the first thing we had to do, we moved in when we first got married. We had a, upstairs, downstairs apartments.
Mhm.
So the first thing we had to do, and Steve had been working on this, was to get a house that was accessible. And we were lucky we were able to get a house that was mostly taken care of except for the bathroom. And my sister and brother-in-law are architects, so they got the bathroom dealt for us. Dealt my um, husband's father put the ramp in the garage so I could get in and out. So it's just very few things have to do to take care of our physical needs. And so it was just a matter of getting used to those kind of things and getting in the real world, like you say. The challenging thing was getting back to work. And my occupational therapist said it was real unusual. I got back to work. The accident was in December, and I was back at work in August, I believe. So it was, very short time compared to most people getting back to work after a major tragedy like this.
So
And I went to work.
what type of work did you do at that time?
At that time, I worked for Carter Blood Center. And when I started there, I was a donor recruiter, but I had already, the boss had already told me he was going to move me into community relations position. And so that's what I did when I got back to work, because the donor recruiter had to carry around equipment and do a lot of things. And that would have been impossible for me. So donor recruitment was mainly doing the newsletters and reaching out and talking to the media. I would, when blood shortages, I'd go on the news and radio and such and say we needed blood. And it was a fun job. I enjoyed
Yeah.
it. For about 7 years.
That's fabulous. As I mentioned to you, for the audience, we visited for just a couple of minutes before we came on to the podcast, and I mentioned that I love to do these because I love to talk. So any job where there's talking, I'm up for, right?
Yes.
Interesting though, I'm very much an introvert because I like to talk when I want to talk, and I want to be alone when I want to be alone. And after I'm done talking, it takes me a while to regroup. I don't get energy from it. It does drain me, but I do love it. So I get
Yes,
that. So I bet you that was a fabulous job. What a setup for you that was
it
all
was.
arranged for you to come back to, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he actually went against the big boss's wishes. He really didn't want to hire me because of the situation I was in. He came to me in the rehab, says, "You've got your job when you're ready." So that he
Wow.
stepped up for that. And it does, one of the things about being in a situation is when you're doing other things and working, and it takes off your mind about what is going on with you.
Yeah.
It takes
Yeah.
away the pain and stuff. So
Exactly. So then you have five children, or not, you don't have five children. Did you just say five children? I get
two,
five children.
two children.
Two children, I'm sorry, they multiplied. So you had two children. It was 5 years. That's where I got the five.
That's
Five
right,
years.
5 years.
Then you had
Yes,
two children. And so
yes.
how did that work growing up with children and, dealing with your disability? I'm assuming at that point you are or are not working.
I'm working still with Carissa, my first. I would go in, I would pump. We would do a lot of stuff like that just to get up, get moving in the morning. I would pump and have the milk for the caretaker, the girl that took care of her during the day. I'd come home at lunch and feed her again, go back to work. There's a lot of back and forth bit. And I nursed her for about a year like that.
Wow.
And then Kaylee came along about 3.5 years later, and I was still working, but then things started happening. I ended up getting laid off, so I stayed home with her for a while, and it worked out okay. But the challenging part was with the babies when they were young. But I could get help with somebody to put a pillow on my lap, and I could feed and do the diapering. I mean, do the feeding. The diapering was always the challenging part with I could use Velcro, but I would have to use my teeth. And I've always teased about dirty diapers were the worst, when you had to take off the dirty diapers. And but I managed, you do what you got to do. That's
Ain't
fine.
that the truth? That is so the truth. And just
Mhm.
digging in and having the commitment and the drive and the motivation to not give up, to just do what you have to do, right?
Yeah,
I
that's
think
it.
not in the same level. I'm not belittling where you are, but I think we all face things that we have to make the decision. Well, I just need to do this. I mean, I can't not do it. And
Right.
so we just do that. So
Mhm.
talk a little bit about the writing process and how long it took you. We've talked about that a little bit, but let's dive into that a little bit more. And,
Okay.
and the humor, where did the humor come from? Is that something you've always had that gift, or is that something that you kind of got as as a satire off of the experience?
Yeah. I would say I always had it. I always loved to joke, and when I was in school, I was not the clown, but I enjoyed sense of humor. I think just from with that, and then just having these crazy things happen to me, you have to. You and when I first got hurt, my philosophy was I can either sit there and hope for a cure, or I can get on with it and just deal with what I've got and keep moving and working with it. And so that's what I did. And so as I was writing these Christmas letters, I think I started like in 1987. And that was before the big deal with, now everybody does Christmas letters, but this was early on that I don't believe that many people were doing it, but I would do it on red or green paper and just state what was going on at the time. And I mentioned I would say we would go to the track and I would ride a manual chair around the track. And I'd say it was let's see, was it 40-minute mile? Instead of an 8-minute mile, it was my 40-minute mile around the track. But that kept me in good condition because I'm in a motorized chair, so I really don't get a whole lot from that. So now I try to do arm exercises and keep up my heart rate and things like that. But I just, every year I'd write a Christmas letter. Well, people started saying, well, you need to write a book, and every year I'd say that people would send back, you need to write a book. And so they just enjoyed my Christmas letters. Like I said, I try not to brag. I just try to tell the funny things that were happening that year. So as I went along, I started just picking chapters and figuring out what I wanted to say and expand upon it. The fun, one of my favorite stories is when we went to Fossil Rim, I think out of Fort Worth, Granbury, and we were going up the mountain when my brakes gave out and we started backing down the cliff. And we really thought we were going off the cliff, but we fortunately went to the left instead. But the girls were screaming, and I was yelling, brake, brake, emergency brake. Well, Karen, my sister, was on this side. There was no way she could have gotten over to the emergency brake. So anyway, we ended up stopping in this ditch. And it's funny when the kids were talking about heaven on the way home, and they just said, I think Carissa said, if you don't love God, how'd she put it? If you don't love God, bad things will happen. And so then my niece, a little bit younger than her, she sits there a minute, she goes, I love God, so, and she went on, Danny says, I thought I saw heaven once. And Carissa said, I did too, but Daddy told me it was just a jet stream or something like that. So these girls that, under 7 or 8 years old were all discussing heaven and God. And it's just priceless.
It is. And isn't it sad? I mean, there's the beauty now that we have of the digital age. If all those Christmas cards would have been digitized or someone had copies of them, you would have had a lot of your material for your book, right? But all of it's in your brain anyway, but it's amazing.
A lot of
The
it
stories that
was,
we remember. Yeah.
Yep. My aunt ended up sending me quite a few of the early ones that kind of had gotten lost so I have a majority of them.
Oh, wow.
There was just a few that were kind of offbeat, but I kind of remembered, like you said, some of the stories and enough to publish the book. And I think it was really not until Carissa was in college that I actually started actively writing the book. And once I moved to College Station in 2013, I finished up writing the book, and it was a real joy.
Yeah. And so let's talk a little bit. You alluded to it, and you obviously have a wonderful, wonderful attitude. But so let's talk a little bit about of that. And I think I've alluded to it already, but let's go back and look at it. How do you remain positive and joyful, within all the circumstances that you've had to face, from the accident and all the hurdles and everything that you've had to encounter in the, let's see, well, that'd be 20, 30 years late, that'd be 20 some over.
This will be 41 years this
There we
coming
go.
December. Yeah.
Wow.
I would say the most important thing is taking the focus off myself. I love people and I go around like right now, and I had Angel listed in my book, but she has died since then. Now I have Vancouver. And so he and I go around to facilities, and he's a therapy dog as well. Service dog, therapy dog, and now he's a canine response team dog. If there's a crisis in the area, we will go and just comfort those people with the dog. And I go around and visit with these folks. I think support, if you are in this situation, I would say get your church support. I mean, the churches are wonderful and you just get community build up. I have the church, I have the dog group, and now I've become a part of, I don't know if you heard of Kairos. It's a prison ministry, and we do 42 men each 6 months in October and April. Well, this last time I was really encouraged. I wrote when I write my letters, I kind of tell them, although I can't relate to what they're in, I said, but I've had a body that basically has been imprisoned for 40 years. And I kind of tell them a little bit about some of the scriptures that helps me get through it. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I feel like the Holy Spirit is in me and helps me get through each day. And this one man who was about, he he hit my heart because one of his letters said he had killed his children's mother, and so he was looking for forgiveness from them. And he said how much my letter meant to him, and so that shows that it helped him at least. And so I just kind of take the um, focus off myself.
Yeah.
And just I'm very lucky because I had a good childhood too. I mean,
Yeah. I think
my
that does help. One of
yeah,
the illustrations that I use when I talk sometimes is that I was in a prison of my own making. I
yeah.
did emotional walls that I had made from
Mhm.
choices and situations and relationships that I had gotten into and woundings. And so I had walled myself into a prison. So
Yeah.
I totally understand that. And it sounds like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it
Mhm.
sounds like just as with me, God took what was really a very dark period of my life and he's used it for good for others. Not that
Mhm.
I think he made me go through that for that, but he's able to take what bad happens to us and use it for the good of others. And even for ourselves, it brings healing in our own life.
I like in collisions, it says glory strength. And I
Yeah.
think that you endure the unendurable.
Yeah.
And I think that is exactly what has happened with me, that
Yeah.
God has used me to help others.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping with this book, I hope that was the whole purpose of the book, to show people that, hey, you can have this happen. I have little stories, I mean, little um, lessons in life on the chapters as well. I think that's one of the people I spoke to at the retirement home. He loved that part of it. He wanted me to incorporate that into my speech. So that's what I did. And so,
Wow. So
yeah.
you really went where I was going to ask next to talk
Mhm.
about the purpose of the book and who is your reader and who is it your audience? Who was it that you were writing to and who can benefit from reading your book?
Anybody that's had it doesn't have to be a tragedy like mine. It could be any kind of thing they're going through. The, the thing I've heard the most from people is, oh, I loved it and gave it to so and so and shared it with so and so. And that's exactly why I wrote the book, is to give it out to people. It's not very long. You can read it in a day, really, or you can just read it a chapter. The chapters are fairly short and you can just read them as you have time. But I just wanted to help anybody else that can be um, in the same head situation, that life can still go on. You can still be joyful. But the
Mhm.
main thing is to take the focus off yourself and just go along. And these folks that I visit with the retirement homes, they give me blessings back. Although the dog blesses them, they bless me with all their wisdom, and you can see the joy in their faces when the dog comes in the room. So that's what keeps me going a lot of times now. Just and my oh, I forgot to mention, since the book, I have two more grandchildren. So I have four grandchildren from my older daughter. Um, I do have another situation, and if I do write a second book, my younger daughter, Kaylee, unfortunately has mental illness. She's a paranoid schizophrenic. At the time, I don't know where she is exactly, but with the peace and I read every day with devotionals and the Bible, I just know that God has it, and there's nothing I can do in the meantime. but just keep praying for her. But my next book, if I do write it, will be Mental Illness is a Pain in the Brain.
Oh, wow, great title and a great subject. Uh,
Yes,
for those of who are the author spotlight podcast listeners know that we just recently did a
I
program
read
with someone with mental
Sharon and
illness.
Sharon.
Yeah. Oh, you know them. So yeah, they were
No, no, I
great.
listened. I don't
Oh,
know about it. I listened to
okay.
it.
Well, they were great guests, just as you are, and I think that's a really huge area that
Yes.
needs help. So it sounds like the book is a great book for encouragement, no matter what you're facing, whether it be physical, emotional. It would be something just to help people get through where they are, and I
Yeah.
think that's so needed in the world that we live in, for
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
So, Cherie, where would we get one of your books?
Amazon is carries it. Barnes and Noble, you can order off of Barnes and Noble, and Covenant Books. You know, I don't know if you can go directly to them, but those two sources, you can definitely get it there. I carry a bunch in my trunk, so if you're in town, you can get it from me.
So I want to encourage our listeners to go on over to Amazon and get a copy of the book because, who doesn't want to read a good book that's encouraging? I mean, all of us have to face things and we need those encouraging words. And I love, again, let's just go over the title again. Breaking Your Neck is a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
How she handled life challenges with grace and humor. But look, that would be what you'd look for is Breaking Your Neck is a Pain in the Butt by Cherie. And Cherie is spelled, as you can see it on the screen, Chere. And her last name is Cotner, Cotner. So with the title, you'll probably be able to find it. But for sure to make sure you know it's hers, it's Cherie Cotner. Did I pronounce his last name correctly? Cotner?
Yes, you
Cotner?
did.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's easy if you see it. It's a yellow book. My sister
Oh, here
tells
we
me
go.
that people love yellow, so
Yeah.
we did it yellow, and this is
Uh-huh.
my daughter and younger daughter on the back with the dog, and the cat who got lost is on the back of the book.
Yeah, there's something about animals that certainly add to our life, don't
Oh,
they?
yes, and that's what keeps me. Vancouver is my companion,
Yeah,
and he is another joy of mine that just, every day, and I have to take care of him, so it's, work on my part,
keeps you
but
up.
it's a joy. So I've
So
been very blessed.
we're about out of time. Cherie, is there anything that I haven't asked or something that you'd like to tell us about the book that we haven't even ventured into?
I know. I think that we covered a lot of it. I'm trying to see if there's um I love at the end my previous teacher called me Joy on Wheels. And I love that. And it just shows you can still keep joy in your life. I think when I read the Bible, it says it's not really guaranteed to be happy. It's just we can be joyful still, despite our circumstances. And if you're as blessed as I am, you can continue on that route. And
Yeah.
I, just-
And
I think my mother too. I didn't mention my mother was a big factor in my life because she was always positive, had a lot of things happen in her life, and so she really was the one that I can thank for a lot of this.
yeah. Obviously for imparting the attitude, and the let's get it done part of who you are. And I've also heard, and it's been said that happiness is conditional because it's based on what happens on the outside. But
Yeah.
joy is something that happens on the inside. And so we don't have to no one else contributes to that or can take away from that. God can put that there no matter what happens on the outside. So I so appreciate you bringing out, that message. And your book is going to be a blessing to those who grab it, I'm sure. Once again, because I like to make sure everybody understands, Breaking Your Neck is a Pain in the Butt by Cherie Cotner. go on over to Amazon and grab that book because we're out of time today. But I hope
Thank
that
you
you
so
have
much.
enjoyed listening as much as I have enjoyed meeting a new friend. Right? Don't you just
Yes,
want to be
I love
for a
it.
hug and be a new friend, right? And so
Thank
we want to say thank you to Cherie. Thank you for coming on and telling your story, and
thank you,
you've
Cynthia.
inspired us today. You really have.
I really appreciate it. You have a wonderful day, blessed
You're
day.
welcome. So we want to thank our sponsor, yourauthorhub.com, for helping us make this podcast happen. And before we close, fourth reminder, be sure to go over to Amazon and get that book. I think that you'll really enjoy that. So we'll look forward to seeing you the next time on the Author Spotlight. Have a great day.